Hi there everyone, Lars here with a quick writer's discussion brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and today I want to talk about having chapter headings. Are they a yay, a nay? Should you go through the process of having these gorgeous beauties, or are they just eyesores? Let's quickly talk about them. Chapter headings are most often used by authors as a means of letting the reader know what they are about to get themselves into with the story. The change in perspective, maybe some of the themes that will be within this chapter, maybe a little bit of the world building or some insight into the main characters' perspectives, their way of thinking, stuff that you normally wouldn't get within the body of the text. The chapter heading is ultimately there to help impart information that the author doesn't believe that he or she could just very easily fit within the body of their story. Thereby, they're able to still communicate some really neat bits of the story without having to awkwardly shoehorn them in to the rest of the chapter or into a scene where it might not really belong. Now, for some of the drawbacks that come with doing this, number one, there's a lot of readers who will actually skip over these chapter headings because they don't feel like it's very important at all. They want to just get straight to the story, and so they'll just skip on over it. For some people, it derails them a little bit. They wonder, why did you put this in here? Well, you could have just had from chapter 2 to chapter 3, and everything would have been flowing just fine. I would have been able to pick up the context clues for myself. You don't need to spoon feed me stuff through these chapter headings. Other writers will say, why bother setting this stuff to the side if you could have put it somewhere within your story? Yes, it might not fit here within this chapter and its scenes, but it could have fit in somewhere else. Why are you bothering to put it in right here? It doesn't really work. And if you want to give us all of this amazing world building, wouldn't it be so much more gratifying and rewarding for the reader to discover this for themselves as they dive deep into your story? Why derail the pacing? Why take away from the power of your prose? Why just go off on these weird tangents here with these chapter headings? So for matters of aesthetics, for pacing, for practicality, for the art, for the story, there's a lot of reasons why authors and readers will say, don't do chapter headings. But at the same time, chapter headings can be very valuable to help build up things that are happening within the story that might have otherwise have actually taken away from what you're building from chapter to chapter. So let's say, for instance, that you wish to have some grandiose reveal about a character, or some big reveal about the world building, or that you're building up your magic system, or a little bit of the mystery, or that you're trying to build up a character's backstory. These chapter headings can be utilized to put in those clues, to put in those segments that otherwise, if you were to compile them all together, would be their own chapter or series of chapters that might just not really fit in well at all with your story. This is a way of utilizing the space on the page in a fun and inventive way to give your reader, give the overall audience little bits, little breadcrumbs of cool things that you are cooking up. And they are incredibly digestible. Little bits of like, hey, here's a little bit of world building in just 3 sentences. Oh, here's a little bit of insight into one of the characters in just 3 sentences. Haha! Ooh, you will want to have this clue for later on. It might not necessarily be monumental to everything that I wish to create, but if you are paying attention, you'll be even more so rewarded with a fulfilling ending by the end of the book. Ultimately, if you wish to use the chapter headings in fun, inventive, creative, and complementary ways to your story, you want them to be something that helps to enhance the overall reading experience. Maybe not necessarily be absolutely pertinent to what someone is reading. For example, in the Mistborn trilogy, each chapter has little excerpts from a book that one of the characters is reading. Now then, within the actual story, Characters will talk about what they have read within the book that is constantly being cited in the chapter headings. As a result, you don't really need the chapter headings to get everything that is necessary for you to understand how that book plays into some big reveal later on within the Mistborn trilogy. Everything that you need is in the prose of the story. However, for the reader who wishes to consume everything, these chapter headings give you so much more information that while it might not be necessary to enjoy the overall story, it helps to expand the world even more. And I took some inspiration from this when I wrote my book Bleed, Steam, and Steel. Because I was, at the time of writing it, confining myself actually to just novellas. I hadn't yet come together to make one big novel, but in novella format, so no more than 40,000 words, I really wanted my audience, I wanted my readers to just enjoy this large steampunk world with its many cultures, with its vast history and everything. But I couldn't put that into 40,000 words without derailing the stories of Aska, of Zimon, and of Lagertha as they go on their various journeys. That would have been just way too much of a deviation. It would have taken away from the pacing and everything. So instead, I used the chapter headings to help give information about the world, whether it be through culture, military tactics, spy intelligence, history, and then use that to help kind of set up the theme of the story. For instance, all of Aska's chapters open up with an explanation and detailed description of different battle stances and moves and the philosophy behind them. And the philosophy or the battle stance would then be highlighted within that chapter, whether it be through something that Aska does that embodies that philosophy for that particular move, or she would actually literally use that move in a fight. This way, then, I felt that I was able to impart at least a little bit more knowledge and insight into the world and cultures of Bleed, Steam, and Steel without having to hit the brakes and say, hey, look, everyone, here's this awesome samurai move that Asuka's using. Hey, everyone, let's have a look at this huge song that Lagertha and Emil are going to sing. No, I had to keep things nice and concise within the actual story because, again, I was only working with 40,000 words per POV until later on I then merged them all together into one book. And as I'm now getting ready to release my next novel, which is a murder mystery, A Study in Blood, I found that it was a lot of fun to add in chapter headings that gave you more of the broader investigation into the murder of General Goulion. Because within the book, you're only following a couple of characters as they try to figure out what happened in this crazy murder in the Rue Morgue style absolute slaughter inside of a military base. And so since you're only following what a handful of characters would know and be able to observe and glean, you're not getting necessarily the whole story. Now, following those couple of characters gives you everything that you need to appreciate the reveal and the tragedy and the action and all of the character arcs. You get all of that through the main POVs. The chapter headings are then basically there to impart yet more information to the reader where they can then say, so this is what was all being done on the side. These are what other investigators were accumulating. This is yet more knowledge that help me understand better what kinds of things were going into the investigation of this murdered general. It's interesting, but if I want to skip over it, I can skip over it, and it's not necessarily going to destroy my enjoyment of the story. But if I read more of it, I'll be more rewarded by the end because I will know so much more knowledge, and I might realize what's a red herring and what isn't if I'm paying very close attention to it. It is a bit of a gamble for me to do because, again, there are those readers who feel a little bit derailed by seeing the chapter headings. For some readers, it's not a problem whatsoever. For others, it is. So you, as the author, you have to consider for yourself, what do I really want? What's going to work for my book? And to kind of create some points of comparison. In my books for The Legend of the Ten Lords, for Notice Me, Send Pie, and for Sandwich Desperados, you don't have those chapter headings, and the books flow as they do, and trust me, you don't miss them. Sure, they could be fun if I threw them on in there, but they're not necessarily needed. You have everything that you need to enjoy the story right there. But for books such as Bleed, Steam, and Steel, for A Study in Blood, for the Monarch Mercenaries' Autonomy, I do indeed put in those chapter headings because there is so much more about the world that I wish to introduce in a fun, creative way that, again, as the reader, if you're paying attention, you will be rewarded with a greater view of what this world all contains, of who these characters are. And again, if you decide to just skip over it, you don't necessarily need these things in order to enjoy the overall story. Everything that you need is right there on the page. It is a creative choice. It is then an artistic choice on my part to bring a different feel and flavor to my book. You then, as writers who are considering possibly having your own chapter headings along with your own chapter art and all of that, I personally really do like it. I know that there's some people who don't. You, as the creator, you have to decide for yourself what will serve your story the best. If you believe that it needs the artwork, then it will need the artwork. If you believe that it needs these chapter headings, then put it on in there. And then show your work to your beta readers. Receive feedback and hear from them whether or not they enjoyed having those chapter headings and that chapter art. If they felt that was really good and that helped to complement the overall story and didn't unnecessarily make things wonky or break up the pacing, then perfect. You've achieved everything that you wanted. If for some reason your beta readers say, no, we don't want this on in there, then find out from them why that's the case and adjust accordingly. So yeah, I know for some people you're going to be like, wait, Lars, but what should I do? What should I do? Please give me the answer. Well, it's your book. Do with it what you feel is best. I'm just laying out right here the pros and the cons and my own experiences and examples. Again, I don't use chapter headings for some of my books because sometimes I feel like it's unnecessary. But for other books, I say, no way, Jose, I absolutely want to have those chapter headings on in there because I feel like it brings more variety, spirit, feel, and individuality to the story. Or then you can even look at something like Please Notice Me Said Pie. I don't have chapter headings, but I actually have recipes for all of the pies that the chapters are named after. So hey, something for people to check out. Again, it comes down to what you as the author really, really want to do. It's your story. Have fun with it. So, with all that being said, thank you so much for coming here and checking out this video. I'd like to hear about your writing progress. What are you working on? Would you use a chapter heading or not? And if you have, what are the things that you especially wish to do within those chapter headings for your book? And until I hear from you and until the next video, y'all, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, tschüss.